Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us for the third part of the Ditch the Textbook webinar series. I know for those of you who have been with us for the last two, this is number 3. So thank you for joining us, knowing that for those of you who attend 3 out of 5, you do get a $75 gift card of your choice as long as you're fully participating in those. So feel free to participate in the poll that we just launched and also in the chat as we go. This series, as you guys know, if you've been participating in them, it serves as ways for you guys to learn insights and solutions into those daily challenges you or your team are likely facing, specifically around those day-to-day business struggles or day-to-day struggles as an individual in the skilled trades, if you will, that a textbook can't really provide you because it's more of those business pieces. We look forward to having you guys join us on every third Wednesday of the month at noon Central Time. We do have still 2 upcoming. So we have Chad Susi speaking in December on building your brand. And then we also have Joel Birkin speaking in January on scalability. So be on the lookout for those too. With that all being said, my name is Elizabeth Hansen. I am the marketing campaign manager here at Interplay Learning, and I'm your moderator and host today. So I will be monitoring the chat. Feel free to throw questions in there. We can answer them live or in the live Q&A at the end. Additionally, we'll be popping up a few sound offs and polls to make sure you have a chance to participate to get that gift card. Today, we are going to be chatting about upskilling and cross-training to create more profitable and competent technicians, and how that also can relate to, not only the technician side, but how that relates to being more profitable as a business as well. Before we do that, though, just a few housekeeping notes. I know they're not as fun, but you guys will be muted for the duration of the webinar. Additionally, let us know what questions you have. We'll answer them live or at the end. And you'll receive a webinar replay link within 24 hours of this webinar end as well. So be on the lookout in your inbox for that. All that being said, joining us today is Frank Garro. Frank began his career in the plumbing trade. He worked for a company that also did HVAC work, and a chance to visit the ASHRAE trade show in Chicago actually gave him a really unique chance to explore the inside of a rooftop unit. It was literally big enough to walk inside. So he was really hooked on HVAC after that, and it inspired him to begin studying HVAC at the local community college. 18 years later, he became the program chair for the HVAC department at Fort Wayne campus of Ivy Tech. And I think with all that being said in his background, you can see why he's the perfect fit for today's conversation. So thank you, Frank, for being with us today to chat about upskilling and cross-training.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
We are excited to have you joining us all the way from Indiana.
Yes.
Awesome. In today's discussion, we're going to touch on how you as an individual can accelerate your career and better prepare for the new challenges in the trades, different modalities to that training, intake, how we can form a better understanding and more well-rounded understanding of training, and how you can show your worth as both a company and as an employer to that individual who's cross-trained. So to get our conversation started, I thought it would be fun to have Frank kind of touch on his background and why he is such a great person to have being essentially on this webinar to speak to this topic. Frank has a really interesting career background and a really interesting career path to becoming a very successful business owner. So I'd love, Frank, if you could just share a little bit about your background in plumbing and HVAC and even some of that accounting and marketing that we've talked about together.
Okay. Well, I don't know how successful I am as a business owner, but I know that I've learned a lot of hard lessons that make it a lot easier to operate now than it was when I first started. So I first started out in the plumbing trade. And once I served my apprenticeship and got licensed, I ended up working for a company that also did HVAC. So every once in a while, if I didn't have a project that was pressing on the plumbing side, they would use me over to help install a furnace or something like that. So it was always nice to have a guy that knew how to put pipe together on the crew, because they would give me some jobs that were more related to plumbing, put together the gas line, do the venting, and I could do that stuff really easily because I'm used to putting pipe together. And as you said earlier, that was the same company I was with when we went to the ASHRAE show in Chicago. And it was at McCormick Place, and Train had an entire display on one wall of the McCormick Place, and they had a giant rooftop unit that had a door on it, and they actually let you walk inside. And I thought, man, this is the coolest thing. So I decided I wanted to start studying HVAC. So I started taking classes and learning more. And I guess maybe one of the reasons why I'm a good person to talk to in this regard is, even though I had my trades licenses, my journeyman's license, my contractor's license, eventually, I still was always putting myself on a path to learn more. And I was always looking at that next career move. And career moves don't just happen. Career moves, once you get your sights set on one, you really need to prepare yourself for that next move. So you figure out what is the type of training or qualifications that's required to get you into that job, and then you get busy on it. And so I was always doing that. I was always setting my sights on the next step. And so once I had developed enough expertise in the plumbing and HVAC, I decided to start my own business. But sort of concurrently, I started taking classes at one of the local universities on accounting and marketing and how to manage a business and how to understand taxes and things like that. I mean, when you start off in business, that's one of the major things that you need to understand, so that you know what things are legitimate deductions and stuff like that. So anyway, I was always looking toward the next step. And then even after that, I was considering my job position as an owner and hiring employees, doing more estimating and things like that on the job. So I was wanting to learn more about how to design systems. So I was taking some engineering courses or mechanical engineering related courses and things like that. So, I always had my sights set on the next step, and I was training myself to move toward that. So when it comes to cross training and lifelong learning is the term we like to use for today, I'm kind of addicted to doing that.
Yes, which I think was very evident from the conversations we've had thus far, is like that lifelong learning is super important and super imperative. Not everyone, unfortunately, is as motivated as you, but it's really exciting to see those who are, and also find new avenues to excite learners. And I think that's a big piece of what this conversation is about when it comes to upskilling and cross training, and how we can excite people towards the trades in general, how we can excite them towards continuing that education and why that education is important. So thank you for sharing. That was a great start to kind of transition us into, as almost the individual level, why the trades are a really unique opportunity for upskilling and cross training, and also kind of on that foundational level, where we can start at ground zero with someone who is wanting to, start in HVAC and then grow their career, on what that looks like from modalities of intake, what that looks like from training, if you will. If you could give us some background on, in your classroom, how you've seen students approach cross training and upskilling, and why it's, important to be that well-rounded individual.
Mm-hmm. I think cross training is important for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that I think is also important is that before you cross train, you really should become an expert in the particular field that you've set your sights on. So spend the time to learn that and develop some expertise in that. And then what you're going to find is, like in my example, for instance, when I become a journeyman level plumber and then start learning HVAC, there are so many of those generalized skills that I can transfer over to the next discipline. And it makes it that much easier to learn it, and that much quicker to develop skills in another area when you've already developed them fairly well in the first. So as much as I advocate the cross training, I wouldn't want to, and I've seen this, you could just overwhelm somebody with too much diversity in what you're trying to present to them. So get them on a track, get them to where they develop some confidence in the first trade, and then you could start to migrate over to some other types of work and train them for that. So I think that that's probably the first step, is to become an expert first and then expand.
Totally. And I think there's so many different ways that especially in the trades, that you can take that, as we were talking about on Monday. And I know I'm jumping ahead here, so we'll get to it in a second, but, you know, making you a more available employee too. So besides just learning those foundational levels and learning in plumbing or HVAC exactly what I need to do and exactly how I can intake that information, whether it's through a manual, through a textbook where you have to sit down and understand the code, you know, through technology, getting you up to speed, hands-on, whatever that may look like in that capacity, and then taking that with you to, you know, a new skill, whether that's upskilling or cross-training. It gives you more ability to work, if you will. And I know that's not something that we're lacking any kind of work in the skilled trades right now, but it gives you more availability as an employee to say, I'm going to go do a plumbing job today, or I can be available for a plumbing job today, even though I'm typically doing HVAC work. So it really is in making yourself a more profitable human being in this capacity of work too.
Yeah, so in terms of these modalities, one of the ways that worked out well for me at the time was I would do a lot of reading in addition to the things that I would be encountering during the day, and getting tech support and learning about the equipment that I was installing at the time. But I would do a lot of supplemental reading and prescribe to some different trade magazines. And I would anticipate every month when those would come, and I would devour them as soon as they got there. And one of the lessons that I learned out of that is that, you know, you could learn at a certain pace and develop a certain level of experience that is in keeping with, you know, the calendar years that you're in the trade. So you can, you know, say that you've been in the trade for 5 years, but if you've been in the trade for 5 years and then you do some of these other supplemental things, it's almost as if you've been in for 7 or 8, because, you know, you do a lot of extra reading on the side. You go to the vendor training seminars that are offered, and those are usually pretty easy to do. It's maybe a half a day, a few hours, and they have free food. So I was always on the lookout for those, not just because of the food, but, you know, because of the topics that were being covered. And even if it wasn't something that I really understood or really worked on, you know, before I was doing boilers, I was going to seminars on boilers just so I could figure out what they were. I didn't even know. So I didn't have any formal training in them, but I would just get little bits and pieces, and it would get me excited about it. And I'd study more on my own. And eventually, you know, I'm known in the county where I live as the guy that does radiant heating, because in Indiana, there aren't a lot of them. On the East Coast, everybody does radiant. It probably sounds weird that we install furnaces around here, but so, you know, that desire to learn more and to expose myself to more things is good. And there's lots of different ways that we do that. So we do it through formal schooling. So I've done that. And there were, you know, there's always lots of nowadays a lot more technology based programs available. I mean, even things like YouTube. We learn a lot off of YouTube, and of course, Interplay Learnings is more like those learning paths that are more handpicked, and they're a little more concise than maybe what you'd find on YouTube. But those things didn't exist back when I was in the trade, but they're there now. So
Polaroid camera, if you will.
We have a whole new level of technologies that we could pick from to help us learn faster and accelerate that process.
Yeah, totally. It makes me think of our Polaroid camera conversation on Monday, where you were talking to essentially how the Polaroid camera was the aspect of understanding what the problem is and processing that to the individual who might have that problem on their home is, hey, look at this photo that I was given on a Polaroid camera, or I took for you on a Polaroid camera. Do you want me to fix it? Where today we have so many different avenues that we can, you know, film, we can find ways to actively show you what's going on live. So it's kind of like a different world. I was even joking that I have a Polaroid camera in my apartment back home, but it's not for Polaroid purposes. It's more for aesthetic. So it really is like that. You have to stick with the time. But I think the other really interesting thing that I see about it, just kind of in my age generation, is almost helping break that skilled trade stigma, knowing that there is such a demand for work. The more that we can show that this is a true education path, where obviously it is, it's imperative to be educated in the trades and know what you're doing, just from a safety perspective and from a general need perspective. But the more we can create that this is a real career path towards everybody, and this is a more educational learning opportunity, the more available and accessible it becomes to people. And I think that that's a really cool aspect of skilled trades in general.
I think that's happening. In my observation as an instructor in the trades, I'm seeing that the average age of our student is going down.
That's awesome.
They're showing up sooner. The enrollment in dual credit programs continues to grow. They're at max capacity at some of the career centers that we partner with. So that's very positive. But the thing that I also noticed that was different than it was 10 years ago is people are showing up much better informed about the skills gap, about the kind of money that they can make, about the opportunities that are available to them as someone who's learning a trade, and they also know what a little bit about the return on investment for that education is, and it's a pretty quick turnaround. So I think that however that's happening, and probably through the internet and a lot of websites that inform people of the average wages and things of different trades and the demand and all that, and Mike Garrow and all that he does to support trades is, which I love. He's one of my heroes. That message is getting out, and I see more and more people with more and more confidence showing up saying, this is definitely something I want to do. They're not really on the fence. They're already in by the time I see most of them. So I don't have to do a lot of convincing, which is nice. Because I don't really, I can be a salesman, but I don't really like to be a salesman. And if I am, I'm kind of a soft sell. But I don't like to push people into something, because you got to be self-motivated. When you got to get up early and work in the heat and work in the cold, those days are not always pleasant. And you got to have some fortitude to be able to stick with it on the days when it's just plain hard. So
Absolutely.
when they already come motivated, that's a big advantage. That's
an awesome insight, and I think a really great nugget that we can take and kind of where a bright light we can see and where the skills gap is hopefully lessening as we move into the future, knowing that that work is abundant and the individuals are not as abundant. I think that's a really great transition into not only you've now become schooled, if you will, you understand the value of cross-training and upskilling, but how does that really in turn create value to you as an individual while you are going through the rest of your professional career? How does continuous education, create more money for you, even past what that general high level, financial grab of the trades provides initially?
Well, I think when you enter into the trade and you have some skills and some schooling behind you and some certifications and things like that, you can you'll find that you'll get offers for more money just to begin initially. And then as you continue to upskill, continue to train, there are times, there used to be times, I don't know if we really run into that so much anymore, but there used to be times when work would ebb and flow, it would slow down, and then you might not get all your hours that week. You might only get 30 hours that week. But the people that were more versatile and more skilled, and their skills were in more demand, then they would keep working all the time. They'd never have any time on the bench. So when you're the person that has upskilled to a point where you're always in demand with the work that is coming your way, then you're never going to have any downtime. So that's good if you don't want that, if you don't want downtime. And most of us don't. We want to keep earning the money that we're there to earn. But also when it comes time, people don't always stay with the same employer for a very long time. And if you can stack your resume with some different types of work experience, it will make you more attractive to the next employer, because they think, man, this guy's already ready to go. I can have him do this or this or this. Maybe they have a need. I've had students where they graduate with an HVAC degree. They go to a company that does both plumbing and heating, and they say, oh, we're really glad that you have all the HVAC stuff, but we really need plumbers. So we're going to start training you to do plumbing right now. And they come back to me and they're delighted. They're like, I'm never going to not be without work. And, that was part of my reason too, is I never wanted to be without work. So I would learn more, or I would have customers that would call and they would say, can you do this kind of work? Can you do this kind of work? And I never wanted to say no because I've already got them on the phone. Sometimes I would say yes.
And then figure it out.
My first stop, as soon as I hung up the phone, was go find some sort of textbook or resource that I can learn how to do what they just asked me to do, because I'm really not sure. And who can I get tech help from that'll help me do this? Because you never want to hang up the phone and say, sorry, I can't do that. Go call somebody else. So, as a business owner and even as an individual, when work is coming your way, you want to be able to handle it. So the diversity in the types of things that you learn is important. It makes you more valuable to your employer. You're going to be happier. You're going to want to stay there longer. And if you do decide that you want to switch, then you're going to be seen as more valuable to the next company.
Yeah. And I think that's an important piece that we can say too. And we'll touch a little bit on that, training your competition aspect here coming up for anyone that might be concerned about that in the chat. But I know that, being in the skilled trades, finding absolute career growth paths is kind of something that we've touched on with Tim's talk and with Krista's talk as well, like how to create retention and attraction capabilities for these, really highly skilled students that may be coming out of the classroom, or for these really highly skilled employees that are now around, in terms of, building that bridge, if you will, that makes them want to work for your business, and what makes them want to stay with your business. And I think a huge aspect of that is creating loyal employees and creating paths where they feel like they're valued in more ways than just, can you get this done?
Yeah, I think companies that have training programs that seem to get the employee in a mindset that we want to develop you. We want to know what your hopes and aspirations are, what kind of things you want to learn, and then we want to get behind you to support that. We're going to have some accountability in that relationship. But if they're always on the side of encouraging you to learn more, then that's typically something that makes people want to stick around. If they feel like the job is a dead end and they feel like all I'm going to do for the rest of my career is put flex stuff together and never get my hands on anything else, that's another one of the some of the negative feedback that I get from students is I went there to work and they told me that I was going to learn all this stuff, and then they just kept me in one job the whole time, and I never got to learn that other stuff. And they were always wanting to get their hands on some other types of work, and then they couldn't. So, another thing that I tell my students is that not all of the jobs in the mechanical industry are blue collar jobs. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's probably a minority percentage of them are the installers and the technicians. There are so many job descriptions that are advanced beyond the guy that is out putting pipe together every day. There's estimators, there's salespeople, there's people that do system design, there's people that are managing businesses, people that work in the supply chain. So there's such a diversity of opportunities that once you get some of the basics of understanding how the work is put together and understanding what it's like putting your time in the trades, in the trenches, there are a lot of directions that you could go beyond that. But it's still kind of a rite of passage that you really do need to put your time in. Mm-hmm. If you ever work for a boss that's never worked in the field, that's never been in the trenches, then it's sometimes a little bit harder to respect their word when they tell you to do something. But if you know that they've been there, that you know that they've done that, and it's some of the first things that my students look for. And I tell them when I first meet them, here's who I am, here's my experience level. And, then they're interested. They're like, yeah, this guy's really done it. So I want to hear from him. But
totally.
The diversity of opportunities is something that people need to know about and be aware of in the mechanical trades.
Yeah, it actually makes me think of something Tim Smith mentioned on our last webinar too, when he was discussing all the different niche ways you could actually just, besides, you know, the different modalities you can take once you get into a particular employer, it's the different employers are so expansive as well. Like he mentioned one of his students went to work on a cruise ship for a year. Like you just don't think about all the different ways to get into the industry besides just all the different paths you can take after you've hit the ground running, if you will.
There's a lot of mechanical systems in a cruise ship.
Yes. And when he mentioned that, I didn't even think about that until he mentioned cruise ship. And then I was like, yes, that takes a lot of, you know, HVAC work for sure to continue to run.
Well, yeah. And there's, and whenever you go on a cruise, everybody talks about the food, right?
Just have to run the commercial refrigeration. Yeah.
Well, there's endless amounts of refrigeration that keeps all that food fresh. So yeah, plenty of work there.
Totally. Yes. Very interesting. Before we transition into the side of, you know, we've talked to the employee or the employee side benefit. Before we transition into that employer side, I have kind of a offhand question, if you will, about, you know, what have you heard from your students as they enter that business market on what made them choose one, you know, business over another, knowing that they probably had several offers, because it's hard to find people that want to work not hard to find people that want to work, but hard to find enough people for your business right now.
Yeah, I've had students that in a fairly short amount of time started beating the streets looking for work and had ended up with multiple offers. Some of them will choose based on the money alone, but some of them will also choose based on that employer's training program and how they feel about it. Some of them will choose based on whether or not they want you to finish school, or maybe they say, you don't really need to finish school. And that's usually a turnoff for students if they're already in school, because they've started something and they want to finish it, and that's good. And I encourage them to do it all the time. But some of it is also proximity to home. They don't want to have to drive a lot. They don't want to have to be far away. They don't want to have to do overnight stuff. So some of that is just the geography of it. But the training programs that the employers support or already have in place seem to be a big draw card for a lot of the students.
Interesting. I like asking that question to everybody who, you know, is an instructor, if students essentially of trade students, just because I like to see if there's different answers or if we're getting kind of consistent answers. And I would say that's very much in line with what Tim spoke to as well, with, you know, seeing where he was able to see his really highly skilled students end up. But I think that's a good transition into our employer side of this conversation. So I started off this webinar today with a question, you know, what is the biggest value of having multiple skill sets? And the majority of people said you're more valuable to your company and you have more growth opportunities. And so I think both of those pieces speak to what your benefit is, and it's an individual within a business. So you're more valuable to your company. What does that really mean? What does that look like by creating an environment that is a growth culture? Knowing that we don't always want to train our competition, but sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah. Well, you're not necessarily training your competition. They could stick around for a long time, and you could reap the benefits of that training as you probably do in the majority of cases. But there are situations where people get trained up and then they decide they're going to switch jobs. And this is sort of an excuse that I've heard from a lot of business owners, where they say they don't really want to put the people through the training. They don't want to go through apprenticeship, but you know, they've been saying that for years, and that they have that hesitation, and they've had that hesitation for a long time. But look at where we are now as a result of that. The fruit of that is that now we are so desperate that we don't have enough people. We don't have enough people that are trained, and everybody's looking for that 5-year journeyman that they could put in the truck and he could start making money for him the next day. Well, somebody had to put in those 5 years with that guy to get him to that place. They don't just magically emerge. So we really need to have more of a global mindset in the industry that says we're going to train people, period.
Mhm.
We're going to train them all. We're going to train whoever comes our way. And there's going to be occasions where we're going to train people and then they're going to go work somewhere else. But then we're going to take somebody that has been trained by someone else or somewhere else. And it's going to go both ways. It's going to come back to you. You just have to believe that. You can't have the mentality that, everything that you build, you need to keep. It needs to be more of an industry-wide mindset that we all need to do it. We all need to participate, and we all need to contribute to building up a workforce that is going to help us to, rebuild the infrastructure in this country.
Definitely.
So it's a big burden, and it's something that we all collectively have to share. So that's a message that I would really like to get out to contractors, is that they just need to think about it big picture, because right now we're all in a difficult spot because we don't have enough people. And the people that we did train are getting older and they're getting ready to retire. And that makes us even more nervous because who do we have to replace them?
Exactly. I think it goes back to that general learning culture. I know on Monday we talked to, how maybe if we had started this 10 years ago in the trades, we wouldn't be in such a, not detriment, but such a spot where we do not have the workers to fill that gap if we created that learning culture 10 years ago versus now. Obviously, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
Yeah, right.
So I think
that's a good analogy, because it does take a long time for a tree to grow up and get some fruit off of it.
Exactly.
So the same thing with a good technician. So build them now, start growing them in your backyard, and you'll be able to pick the fruit off of them, 5 years down the road.
Exactly. And as a collective, if we can create that community and create that career pathing together, I think that it will be so beneficial for the skilled trades and for the industry as a whole. Just because, you can't be that company that gets left behind either. I think we are moving towards a much bigger understanding of why technology is an important aspect of those different modalities of intake when it comes to learning, when it comes to, manuals, when it comes to hands-on training. But if we don't create that learning culture from the ground up, companies will get left behind. The ones that do it will succeed, and the ones that maybe don't will get left in the dust, unfortunately, because it is becoming something that has to be included in garnering that attraction of skilled workers and that retention of skilled workers, because you need who you can grab. There's too much business to go around right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I can anticipate that when I say 5 years, somebody's gonna send me a question and say 5 years is too long. I can't wait 5 years. I need somebody like this month that can go out and get some work done. And that's true, and I get that, and I understand that, and I think that now, because we have so many different ways and modes of training, more so than what we had in the past, that we can accelerate that. We can get a person to a level of productivity sooner, and that's one of the big draw cards of simulation type training. Is you get a lot of reps in, you get a lot of repetition in a particular procedure, and it makes it that much quicker when you get live on the job. If the training that you do in simulation is similar enough to what you see on the job, and most of the stuff that we're building for Interplay really is, and we try to make it as relevant as possible, you get a certain number of reps in there, and then it's pretty easy once you get on the job, and you could pick it up a lot quicker. So getting people to a level of productivity even sooner is a really heavy burden that employers are trying to figure out how to make that work. And adding the simulation training on top of the other schooling that people are doing, not just to replace it, because it's really hard to just replace it, but adding that on top of some of the existing training programs is really going to be a benefit to trying to get the people to be more productive more quickly.
Absolutely.
And more confident. I keep remembering that word that's in the title, and it's part of what I consider part of my job description in training people, is building confidence in them. And I see that there's some stories that I could tell you of students who just were literally, their personality just seems to change in the time that I interact with them, from where they were on the first day. And once they begin to learn something and they know that they've learned it and they know that it's valuable, their confidence level just changes. Their personality literally changes. They're not the
Yeah.
same person that they are when they first come. So that's one of the things I love about the trade, is that as you learn it, and there's a certain character that gets developed in people that work for a living, people that produce something valuable in order to get paid. So when you realize that you have to produce something valuable for your boss so that he can continue to write you a paycheck, then you come to a realization that what you're doing makes a difference. What you're doing makes sense, and I think you sleep better at night.
I think that's a really interesting point that I can, not hands-on in the trades, but I actually can relate to. I understand that mentality of your students that you're talking about. I consider myself a lifelong learner, but the more you step into something, the more confident you become at it, specifically as you intake that information. If you can be self-motivated in learning it and continuing to push yourself forward, the more you understand it, the more you're willing to talk about it, the more you're willing to do it, and the better you become at it. And so I think that's it kind of goes back to that repetition aspect of how can we repeat this process enough to where it becomes second nature, and that's getting people up to speed faster. And, providing that definitely creates a sense of loyalty to your employees. If you're an employer, being able to create that learning culture. Specifically past that, there's, so many other benefits of being able to retain skilled workers through training. Providing those paths makes more confident and profitable technicians. So you may not even be more confident on the site. You might be able to go and do more jobs rather than having, I know you mentioned earlier, having to turn down a phone call. You never want to have to turn down a phone call, especially today when you're competing against probably 5 other firms or maybe more.
And if you know that your workforce is trained and has some experience in it. I worked for a company that we almost exclusively did residential work. They got really ambitious and did a big commercial job. And
that's right.
Guys that were put on that job had never really been on a commercial job, and it's different. I mean, even the materials that you're working with are different, and the materials that the building is made of are different. And what ended up happening was, because they didn't really have experience in that, and it was something that was new, they ended up taking a long time, eating up a lot of labor, and the company didn't make as much money on that job as they could have. But on the other hand, when you have a workforce that's more diverse and is trained in more different, more contexts of construction work, then you can pursue that work and bid those jobs with confidence that you can get it done efficiently with the crew that you have, because you invested in them, you train them, and then you're going to get that back in maybe more profitable work that you can now pursue that you weren't able to pursue before. So from a business owner's perspective, you have to look forward and find, what is the work that is most profitable that I want to get into? And if I want to go for that, does my staff have the training to be able to complete those projects?
Absolutely. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think that kind of circles to a piece that Joe had said in the chat a while back. I asked everyone, sound off on where you've seen cross-training be really beneficial in your current roles. And he talked to not even just being able to understand and bid out before spending thousands of dollars. It's he cross-trained in project management, and it helped him understand and have confidence in who he was hiring before he was going out and spending all of those thousands of dollars of clients' money. Like, how can I actually create this process better so that I am being efficient? So my company is making money, as opposed to, unfortunately, maybe taking too long to finish a job.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what I don't see a lot of is people that do cross-train in project management, because on every crew, there's always certain people that move up and get elevated to, being a supervisor or a crew leader. And they usually get there because they've been there a long time. They know the stuff technically, they know the work, the technical side of the work, but they may not have really been skilled in managing work.
Mhm.
And it's different. It's a different skill set. So that really makes sense if you have somebody on your crew that you have, handpicked to move up. It would make a lot of sense for you to cross train that person in something that is going to be aligned with the future job description that they have, and then move them into it, and they're going to be more effective. But moving somebody into a job just because they show really good, strong skills in one area, so you're going to give them another job, they might not necessarily succeed in that. So
Exactly.
I think that's a really good point. Who was it that said that?
Joe Martin, I believe.
Joe.
Yeah.
Good
Joe
idea,
Martin.
Joe. I like it.
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm a project management guy too. I mean, my bachelor's degree is in construction management. So I appreciate the fact that there is a lot to learn in managing a project as opposed to mismanaging a project. Happens all the time.
Yes, it definitely adds a level of cost when a project is not as efficient as it can be. So I thought that was a really great point, and I was waiting for the right time to bring that nugget out. So thank you, Joe. Before we wrap up, and like I said, feel free to send questions. We'll get to them here in a few minutes. But one last piece before we get to questions, just to wrap up our conversation, I wanted to bring it full circle and talk to the digital native generation, my generation, if you will, and how we have very short attention spans with everything we do. Not unfortunately, but just the way the world is now. We've grown up on this immediate need for information and this immediate have of information. So how do we then transition what we've been doing in the past in the trades to make it accessible to a generation that does probably have a much shorter attention span?
Yeah, well, one of the names of this younger generation is the YouTube generation. And
I have not heard that, but I can agree.
Yeah, the YouTube generation. And I've seen a survey where they said that the most oft used search engine for millennials is not Google, but YouTube. So I do a lot on the instructional design side in my current job at Ivy Tech, and also with Interplay. But one of the things that I keep in mind is that if we understand who our audience is, this YouTube generation, we do not want to hand them a newspaper and say, here you go, learn. We need to use the medium to communicate that they are already accustomed to using. So the more that we can offer by using the technologies that the next generation is used to using and used to using to learn things, then the more receptive they're going to be to that material. Now, I know that we have this name called ditching textbooks, and I'm completely opposed to ditching textbooks because I like textbooks, and textbooks are important.
You need them for the codes for sure.
And you need to sometimes sit down in a quiet place and read to really understand something to the depth that you need to do the work long term. But when it comes to seeing something, being exposed to something, and learning something really quickly that you're going to do on the job the next day, some of the more visually appealing technologies and video-based stuff and simulation-based stuff is a great way to learn that.
Exactly. And I think that kind of takes us back to that modalities of intake. They're all important. They all help you learn. I'm a very visual learner, but sometimes you need kinesthetic things. Sometimes you need audible things. Being able to take in information from several different pathways helps it stick and retain within your brain quicker as well.
Yeah, and I don't consider it to be an alternative, but I consider it to be a supplement.
Exactly.
And with the current burden that we have today, the biggest burden that we have today is training as many people as we can, as quickly as we can. We really need to utilize all of the tools that are available to us. So if we have technology tools that we're not using, then we're just slowing down that process that we really need to accelerate. So I think that it's important that we incorporate as many of those as possible. And and consider really who our audience is and the types of learning modalities that they're most comfortable with.
Awesome. I think that is a great stop point for us to transition to questions. I know we are also at the 45-minute mark, so I want to go ahead and call out next month's, I apologize, webinar with Chad Susi. So he's our electrical SME. And he has some really cool tips on safety and how safety can be used to build your brand and promote positive feedback. So be on the lookout for that in December, third Wednesday of the month at noon Central, just as a reminder. Also be on the lookout in your email inbox for the webinar replay tomorrow. So if anyone needs to hop off, you can hop off, but we will jump into a few questions that we got in the chat here for those who can stick around. So one that we got from Kelsey is, how can I excite my employees to want to cross-train into another career path vertical? So I know we talked a lot about creating that learning path, but what is that excitement? Since maybe not everyone, unfortunately, is self-motivated.
How do you excite them? I think we talked about this. Well, I think one of the ways that they might be motivated is if you can ensure them that cross training is going to keep them from ever being benched, to where and it's like layoff prevention. So if you, as I said earlier, if you're only trained in one thing, if the company doesn't really have a lot of that type of work coming in, then they're going to say, well, we don't need you right now, because the people that are busy are working in this area. So if you cross train, then you get to stay busy. You need to be straight with them and say that there is a monetary reward for cross training. You have to, I mean, you're going to benefit from it as an employer. It will lead to you making more money and being more profitable. But I think you have to let them know that there's some sort of increase in compensation that's tied to that. And another thing that I've seen a lot of apprentices get discouraged by is if they hold it out there and they say that it's coming and then they don't keep their word on it, they're halfway out the door once you do that. So you gotta stick with whatever you promise them. And then if they're anything like me, they're already hungry to learn, and you're just providing for them an opportunity. And most of the students that I encounter that have chosen to be in a trade, most of them are pretty eager already to learn something new. So I don't think that it would be very hard if you put it out there in front of them. I think they're already hungry. You put food in front of them, they're gonna devour it.
Cool. Agreed. We'll answer one more here. So Mike is asking, if I am pulling someone off the street, essentially, to come into my shop, where would you consider me training them first? Would it be HVAC, plumbing? Where do you see the easiest, well, not easiest, but the most, foundational level of learning, knowing that they're all important if you're going to be doing all of them?
Well, I mean, if your company's involved in both, you're probably first going to base your decision on what area has the most need. If all those things are equal, I don't know that it matters. I would ask them what they're most interested in it for, what trade they're most interested in, because you want to have somebody that's already got a motivation. If they tell you that they really want to be an electrician, ask them why. Why do they want to be an electrician? Why do you want to learn? And ask some probing questions. Maybe they don't really know the difference. Maybe they don't really know. Maybe they think that in the plumbing trade that they're gonna clean drains all day. And that's really not the case. I tell people all the time, I mean, most of the time I'm just putting pipe together. It's not a dirty job, really. So people get repelled about plumbing. They say, oh, I don't want to do plumbing because I don't want to be a plumber. Well, you don't even really know what we do every day. But so I mean, have a conversation with the person. But as far as which trade to pick, which is easier or which is the easiest one to learn, I don't know that I could give a really good answer to that. But I mean, the first thing you're going to train them in is how to be safe, whatever trade that they're going into. they need to learn safety, and they need to learn that this is a lifelong career and you want to end it with all your fingers and toes and eyes that you started with. So train them to be safe, expose them to all the different types of work that you do, and then, see which one they bite on first. And, I would just try to get it to where the person themselves is motivated. But if you really need them in one area, then say this is what we're hiring you for, and
Awesome.
then diversify later.
I like that answer. And I like that stopping point as well as a transition into our focus on safety next month. So stick around for that. We will answer more questions for you guys via email that came in. I know we couldn't get to everything live, but be on the lookout for those. Thank you, Frank, for being here. It was really insightful. And thank you everyone else for, listening in today.
It's fun.
Cool. Bye.